Hello, this is Jer. I'm playing Oxygen Not Included. In this episode, I'm going back about 65 cycles, actually to the beginning of the game, to effectively try again. I got a comment from one of the viewers, Spoonwood, mentioned that they recommend using hatches for food, and you're always guaranteed, except for a few of the planetoids, to get at least one hatch. And I did find a hatch in the last playthrough on the left side of the printing pod, I believe. I've ignored it, thinking that the pips would be enough. There it is there. You saw it there for a second. But I'm going to use that along with the pips to produce food. So that will hopefully put me in a situation for getting enough meat. Also, I'm fast forwarding this for the next, until I get to the point where I'm stable and I'm sure that I'm able to get the amount of food that I want, because if you've seen some of my past videos, you would have already seen a lot of things that I've done. So I'm doing the same things, except for the one main difference is I'm putting an even further intense drive on getting those stables full. At least one stable full of hatches, and a bunch of smaller stables filled with pips. And once I get to that point, then I can start consuming anything that comes out of those is meat. And then hopefully I'll be able to crunch the numbers such that I'll get 400,000 calories by the end of cycle 100 to be able to eat it. So get that achievement. So that's the plan. Okay, so at cycle 5, and I'm doing a lot of the same things I did in the last playthrough. I sent someone over the other world by teleportation and brought a defrosted friend home that has 3 skills. They're going to be instantly upgraded to a critter rancher. And I'm going to build a stable. And I'm doing this right away. It's the highest priority nearly for me, is to get a few stables. I'm throwing a few pips in there. And those are going to be a size that I can comfortably fit 3 pips. And I'm building one on the left, so just make sure the dupe that's exploring over there has oxygen. The one area over the left, that's going to be for the hatches. So I'm going to actually have several things of pips and a single thing with hatches. And I'll be able to fit, if I expand it to the maximum size, I'll have 8 hatches there. And the nice thing about a hatch stable is the fact that if I make it tall and only have it four tiles wide, when a dupe goes in there to groom, they don't have to wait for the hatch to walk a long period. But you do have to make sure that it's made out of tiles and not ground, because you don't want those hatches to burrow themselves in the ground while the rancher won't be able to get access to them. Okay, other than that, I'm going to continue adding additional stables. And I'm not going to consume any meat until those stables are full. That was one mistake that I made in the last episode, is I decided every now and then, you know what, instead of producing or getting out some mush meat or some mush, I'm going to treat my dupes. But that's not going to happen in this case. The stables must be full, because that's the only thing that's going to produce more and more eggs going forward. So just doing some of the standard stuff, optimizing light where I've got the rock crusher, upgrading to a great hall when I can. But the priority, if I've got any access to do so, I'm expanding my stable. So just making sure I've got a number of rooms. The other thing is, in the last playthrough, I used a pip to create a nature reserve in a location that I wanted. This time I'm saying nay. I want to put the pip immediately in the stable, and I will just build around where a nature reserve or 4 wild plants already exist. So very quickly, I'm only on cycle 11, and I've got 6 stables. They're not all full with pips, but okay, you're just noticing I'm a little bit shy on oxygen at this point. So that's because I was really focusing on stables even before oxygen, which isn't normal for most of my playthroughs. Oxygen usually comes first, but the Carnivore achievement is a difficult one, so I made an exception. I've got very close to the point where my dupes don't have any oxygen, but I'm expecting I'm going to be able to be okay and just pull off the fact that they have to run out and run through the far corner of the base to get the last little bit of oxygen till I get my electrolyzer turned on. But I'm as long as I can get that thing running, there it goes. Then I'm happy because the earlier I can get those pips in there, just the more pips and eggs and hatch eggs, because I've got those as well. I'll have those all set up for producing meat. So that's really the biggest change that I've made is I'm just prioritizing like crazy over getting those stables created and then filled. And then only after I've kind of done that, then I'm looking at the incubator and the automation that's around it. Also forced to put in electric grill and the mushing machine, micro tube, whatever it was called again. But that is because I'm shy of food. Also going for the locavore achievement, which means I can't plant any things. So it's a lot difficult. This is a very different game when you go for the carnivore and locavore achievement. I'm also going for the super sustainable, so I can't burn things like coal. So I couldn't go over to the other world, grab some coal. And those little hatches, it's nice to have them. They're producing coal, and it's kind of it's insulting almost because I'm producing this great thing I could turn into energy, but I'm not allowed to do so, at least until I produce a large amount of energy. Anyway, enough griping about the challenges. I've decided I'm going for it, so it's my fault for deciding to do it. I got some extra hatch eggs there. That will put me a little bit further ahead, so very happy about that. I've got the exact same setup, by the way, that I have in my last game with the Hugger. They're named the same thing. That's the friend that was defrosted. They immediately had the critter ranching skills, and I've got this room set up so that they're the only ones that can go in. They can get trapped in there for a period of time during the day. That allows me to force them to hug or apply the lullaby effect on all the eggs. The difference this time is they've got different types of eggs. So they get the pip eggs, and then all the varieties of the hatches. Speaking of which, I decided to feed the hatches sedimentary rock, which means I'm going to have to dig around different areas to be able to get that. I've got lots of options around. But the neat thing is, that will ultimately start to increase the chances of those going to a stone hatch, and then eventually going to a smooth hatch, which will help me get the down the hatch achievement. Though I'm going to be honest, when I finally get the carnivore achievement and even the super sustainable one, I plan to ignore the achievements for a while. At least some of the ones that are I know I can do later on, because I really just want this playthrough to be different. Even though it's at the Moonlet playthrough, it was very different than last game just because of that. But I want to concentrate on a higher morale base, higher decoration, just some of the more fancy stuff that I didn't do in the last playthrough where I got all my achievements. So I want to leave it open to be able to get those achievements, but not necessarily focus on the priority. But right now I have no choice. If I want to ultimately get the carnivore achievement, I've got to do this, put this first. So I've got 6 stables. I'm actually going to increase that to 8 at some point. I'm just waiting for a dupe that has the ability to go through obsidian, because I've got some of that to go through, because I want to put it on the top. But anyway, most cycles are the same thing. I'm making sure the eggs, and by the way, those pips that are in there, that those stables can support up to 3 pips, but I'm only putting 2 in there. So if they lay an egg, they're still happy. And it's up to me to be able to get that egg out of there and put it next to the incubator before they lay an additional egg when they become cramped. Eventually I'm going to put automation there to remove the eggs, at which point I'll be able to up the number of pips per stable to 3. So because I've been running electrolyzer, you'll notice I've got lots of hydrogen. This is the same thing that happened in the last playthrough, so I was expecting this. I'm starting the process for building a hydrogen generator to burn that. And it's okay to burn that with the super sustainable. Okay, so that process is probably going to delay me from working on anything else in this game but hugging. So I really gotta worry about hydrogen because as much as that electrolyzer is producing oxygen, if I don't handle the hydrogen, the dupes are just going to suffocate in the hydrogen that's eventually going to make their way down into the base. Also used up my water source, so bringing in another pump or pitch to be able to do that. So this is the same setup in the last episode for the hydrogen generator. Here I'm just making sure I removed all eggs and put that next to the incubator. But the setup for the hydrogen generator is going to be the exact same. So if that gas reservoir is too full, it'll tell the generator to run. Or if we're in need of power, 99% or lower in the battery, it will tell it to start to turn on. In which case I'm burning the hydrogen, but also generating a little bit of power so that my dupes don't have to spend as much time on the manual generator. And that's a really nice thing. So here the automation has started for removing eggs. I'm going to do the same thing for the hatches as well. So anywhere that there's a ranch or a stable, I want the ability to remove eggs right away. And this is going to allow me to up the number of critters that are in the stables from 2 to 3. So that is going to expand ultimately the number of eggs that I'm going to get. At this point, I'm on cycle 33 and feeling a lot better than the last playthrough. I have hydrogen that is just filling up in the base, but I have my stables nearly full already, 6 of them with pips. So that is going to support enough for 6 dupes, which is the number of dupes that I have. If I were to put this into action right now, that's not going to be quite enough meat consumption over the remainder of the time, but I'm going to up the number of dupes to 8. So now I'm digging out 2 additional stables, and I'm going to set it up such that I'll have enough pips to produce food for 8 dupes, plus the hatches. So it's well more than 8 that I'll have access to. If I've got 8 by cycle 50 and it's looking good, then even if I haven't consumed any meat, from cycle 50 on, if every cycle I'm getting 8 dupes to eat meat at 100 calories per cycle, then this achievement will be dead on. I'll probably won't want it to be that close, but I'll feel comfortable in being able to get it. Now, the nice thing is some of those pips that are in the stables are dying, which you might think, well, that's not a nice thing, but actually, when they die, unlike way back when this game first started, they produce meat. That means when you wrangle a pip or a hatch that has hatched, and you want to be able to put it in one of the stables, the actual critter that you're replacing has already provided meat. So it's not as if you're not getting the meat when you put it in a stable. It's just you're going to get that meat much later on when they live their life, produce all the eggs, and finally they expire and they drop a meat at that point. So I was wondering about that because I was wondering if I had to calculate the percentage of critters that had to get used in the stables, but ultimately you don't really need to worry about that aspect of it because even if they go to the stables, they're eventually going to drop meat at the end of their life cycle. So things are looking pretty decent because of the fact that I've been really focusing on getting those stables full. I've got 2 additional ones. So anytime I get new dupes, or not new dupes rather, but new pips, I'm going to put those in the top 2 stables. I'm just upgrading the washroom because I'm noticing my dupes are spending time in the outhouse unclogging that, and that's just a waste of time. So if in the very few times that I've got some time that I don't need to create a stable or fill pips in there, I can do some of those optimizations like getting fire pole and upgrading a washroom. So just putting the pipes to be able to do that and then hopefully be able to upgrade that. But before I do that, I want to put in the automation for the final stables That's because I'm going to get 3 pips to go in there right away. And the moment one of them lays an egg, they're going to become cramped. All right, so focus on that. And then hopefully be able to upgrade to a washroom so my dupes don't have to spend time in the outhouse clearing that out. So every single cycle, I'm doing 2 things. Well, actually, I'm just doing one thing. I was going to say that I'm removing eggs from the stables, but that's automated now. The only thing I'm really doing is looking for eggs that don't have the lullaby effect, bringing them down into the incubator room, and then getting Hugger to go in there and give them all a hug, ultimately applying the lullaby effect so that I'm able to get pips and get hatches faster. Because if it weren't for that, I might not bother with incubator. It's a lot of manual work. And I would just say, you know what, I'm going to get meat in the long term. I'll just plant some plants in planter boxes and eat that until those eggs slowly hatch. But because the carnivore achievement, I can't do that without incubator, I don't believe. So I'm making sure all the eggs, whenever they don't have the lullaby effect, that goes through the incubator, that's going to allow me to get the pips and the hatches to fill the stables as soon as possible, such that I can produce a large number of eggs. And then even then, when they're full and I'm producing a lot of eggs, I'm able to use the incubator to produce meat faster, so that I can begin eating meat earlier on, which is going to be an important thing. So a little bit of automation there on the lights for whoever's going to be doing the grooming of the critters, and I already have one over the incubator, and just throwing some tiles over some of the rooms that my dupes can run a little bit faster. At this point, I don't think this is essential, but I got the pips to start planting some arb trees, just because they can eat those while they're in there. Whether they're hungry or not doesn't seem to affect their ability to lay eggs. It may affect their life cycle. Though if they do eat arb trees, they also produce dirt, which is a resource that I can use later on in the game. So that's not a bad thing. Also using that in the micro musher to produce mush bars. So that's the diet for the meantime until I get to the point that I've got enough pips for all stables and the hatches. And then any new ones, I'll be able to do that. So 5 cycles from cycle 50, when there's 50 more cycles left to get this achievement. And the calculation there is I need 8 dupes. Currently at 6. So I think I'm just going to take on new dupes from this point on and get up to 8 by the time I'm cycle 50. And because my stables are nearly full, this is pretty close, but actually, so I've got 8 stables, but as I mentioned, I also have the additional hatch stable. I think I've got this easy. I think this is in the bag because I've got certainly enough pips and the additional hatches that by the time I get to 50, as long as I get one more dupe, and I'm just really focusing on generating that meat using the incubator to get meat as soon as possible, and they're eating that meat, I'm going to also cook it to in the electric grill to convert the meat to barbecue meat, increase the number of calories that I can get out of it. But this is looking really good, as I mentioned. I'm just going to have to continue being in that room every single day with Hugger to get those eggs to hatch. But I think I'm going to start producing the meat to be able to get this achievement out of the friggin' way, just clean up some of the air that's from the old outhouses that I replaced. And once we get to cycle 50, I'll do a calculation to see whether or not I think I need to go back with a new strategy, which if I do, it'll only have to be a few little changes to it, or if I think I can walk through the next 50 cycles and get this thing. So as I mentioned, this is looking pretty good. I'm going to do the calculation of what things are looking like, but I'm already seeing a number of critters in the little hatchery that's above the incubator, and I'm just about to accept my final dupe. Well, not final dupe, but final dupe for at least getting up to 8 to be able to get the carnivore achievement. I'm being picky, so I reload it. Didn't like that last dupe. Anytime you notice that the printing pod is close to its point, you could do a save. That way, if you reload, it'll give you different options for dupes. And I'm going to call this one astronaut. They like rocketry, suit wearing, and tidying. Animal lover, so a mix of all the different things, but just looking up for the proper spelling for astronaut. But this will give me my 8th dupe. And from this point on, next cycle is cycle 50. As long as I get meat for them in every single cycle to be able to eat, we're good. I'm probably going to ultimately get up to 9 just to make it a little bit safer. I don't want to get up to cycle 99 and cut it really close, but I'm going to wrangle a few of them. So every now and then I'm going to check to see whether any of the stables need to have pips or hatches. If so, I'm going to put a priority on wrangling them. But the ones that are in excess, I'll attack those, get them converted to meat, and then the chef will cook that in an electric grill. And then ultimately at the end of the cycle, when the dupes is hungry, they will consume the meat 1,000 cycles every time, to the point that I get the 400,000 before hopefully cycle 100. One thing that is really nice about the fact that I can choose when those critters are attacked and converted to meat is the fact that I don't need to worry so much about food storage. Because if I have a very low amount of calories, if I convert those to meat, my dupes in a short amount of time should be consuming them. Doesn't mean that a little bit of meat is going to go to waste here and there, but it's not like I'm going to have a huge harvest of something, unless of course I decide to kill all the critters at the same time. I have to be sensible about that. One of the disadvantages is the fact that I have to remember to do this. Otherwise, my dupes, they don't complain a lot. You'll get a little tiny alert that says someone is starving, and quite often I'll notice they're dead by the time that I've actually addressed the issue. But the good thing is I built this spot where those critters hatch right above the incubator, and I'm using the incubator every single day. So it's just a kind of a reminder once I go into that room with Hugger and we start going through all the eggs that need to be have the lullaby effect. I just throw in this extra check to be able to see if my dupes need some food. So with the rest of the time, I'm going to remove some of that salt water, because I want to build masks. And I haven't done this. This is something new that I haven't done the last playthrough. So I think I'm going to end it about here. And in the next episode, I'm going to slow down again. I did this one really fast just because I've already done this episode kind of in a way, except for the fact that I failed to get my achievement according to the calculations that I have. Right now I'm looking extremely good. I think I'm going to get through the next 50 and get this achievement. So as long as every single cycle, or very often, I'm in this room incubating the eggs to be able to get those to continually produce meat, so my dupes also have enough food, but they're not eating something other than meat. Because if they eat something other than meat too many times, I'm either going to not get this achievement, or I'm going to have to print even more dupes, maybe 10 or 12, by the time I get to the end of this, and I'll have to also make sure that I'm generating even more meat to make up for that fact. Anyways, let's do a calculation to see whether or how much room I have for error. So I'm going to go into the achievement to see how much meat I've eaten up to this point. All right, so if we look in the Carnivore achievement, I've eaten almost 50,000 calories. Okay, that's more than I thought. Let's save there and let's talk about this. Okay, in the last playthrough, I got to cycle 65. My stables were not full of pips. I wasn't able to start generating meat. Things were not looking good, so I canceled that, went back to the beginning. Now I'm with a few changes. One, probably the biggest one, is I brought hatches into the mix. So I've got a stable of hatches for my dupes to eat. I also have the pip stables, but I'm at cycle 50, and because I really focused on getting those stables built and filled before anything else, even oxygen, at one point where my dupes almost ran out of oxygen, I've got those stables filled, and I've got 8 of those, such that they're going to produce, just from the pips alone, enough food for 8 dupes, plus the additional meat that I'm going to get from the hatches. The nice thing about hatches is they provide 3,200 calories, which is twice the amount that you get for each individual pip. So I think I've got this. I still have to go through the next 50 cycles, making sure the incubator is running and everything else is going, but I can start to work on some of the other things that I haven't been able to do in the last playthrough in my base. And I think that's going to start with the oxygen masks and starting to look at the outside of my base. Anyway, if you're curious to see that, like this video, subscribe, and hopefully see you in a future episode.